Yeah, Aisha Mahara here. And in this video, which will be a combination of video and podcast video, I want to talk again about the plight of men. You know, after a relationship with somebody with BPD, or someone that the man believes has borderline personality, which is often the case, or it may be that some women in these cases have comorbid BPD, NPD. And it can be hard to know because they don't always go together, and there's a certain percentage well known that, people diagnosed with BPD that have comorbidity, both borderline personality and narcissistic personality disorder. In 30 years of working with men who've been devastated, decimated, and shattered by a borderline woman or comorbid BPD, NPD, or a narcissistic woman that maybe they thought had BPD, or even worse, people, let alone these men, right, with all due respect, do not recover in 2 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 7, 8 months. No. In all my experience, it requires really 18 months to 2 years, often in treatment, or if not consistently in treatment over that period of time, substantial treatment in recovery, inner child healing work, family of origin work, self-differentiation, and recovery from the relationship itself, and finding self again. And it takes 18 months to 2 years minimum for people, but especially for men, and I mean that with all due respect. Men are not going to get over this in 2 months or 3 months or 4 months or 6 months, like I said. And there's a lot of documentation on this as well, and a lot of other professionals would say the same thing that I'm saying here. So there just is no, hey, I'm all over it and I'm all fine now after a mere amount of months or 6 months. Because whatever a person may believe about themselves at that point in time, it's hard to say because everyone's different, and especially with men. But there can be some denial there, and maybe they haven't done deep enough work, or maybe in spite of deeper work or long-term kind of work, the issues just haven't been broken through in a way that really supports the full recovery that takes longer and more time to do. So I got a comment from a man who shared a lot and who's doing well now. And he says so much that's really not only relatable to so many men, but really important for men to hear more about, especially if you're not necessarily a younger man, but a younger man of any age, and you're in one of these relationship struggles, as I'm working with many clients right now who are, or you've just been ghosted, or you've been tremendously traumatized by a woman with BPD, and or in many cases a woman with BPD, comorbid NPD, and what that means especially. And here I want to say this with the utmost care, compassion, and empathy that I do have for men. That I have for men in this situation. Over the years, the number of clients I work with at any one given time is usually at least 70 to 80% men. And I believe there are a lot of reasons for that. And I think that men who have codependency, not all men are the same by any means, but many men who have codependency really find that they do well with working with someone like myself. And in the sense, of course, I'm female, right? But the other thing is I'm very empathic, and I'm very gentle, and I very much hear the pain of men, and I very much respect that, and I very much understand as much as a woman can who isn't a man what that pain is like. And what I think is really important about what I'm going to share here, and it will be mainly a podcast video after this introductory part, is, really comes from my heart and comes from a deep understanding. I don't know what it's like to be a man, but a deep understanding from 30 years worth of working with always higher percentage of men who've been hurt by a woman, traumatized by a woman with BPD, decimated, desecrated, shattered by a woman with BPD and or comorbidly BPD, NPD. And what I know about this is that, and I mean this with all due respect to men, men are not prepared for this. I'm not saying women are, but this hits men in so many different ways that are just way more complicated. It hits women in a lot of ways too, but I'm focused on men here. So the comment was left on a video I did in 2018 about the pain of men, after being with a borderline woman. Because I have so much experience working with men, and I understand, and I've heard from, I don't know, a few thousand men over the last 30 plus years or more. They've really shared their journeys with me, and it's been really deep work they've done. And I just want to say nothing moves me more than when a man, in the process of working with me in healing and recovery, cries and shares his grief, especially the men that feel like it's so not okay for a man to cry. And so many men, when they're boys, they were still raised that way. So I think it's really important for men to consider this wherever you are today, if this has happened in your life, that reaching out for help, and whoever you choose to work with, if I resonate with you, I'm out here. And if it's someone else, that's of course your choice. But I just think it's really important that men really understand that I have a lot of clients, and every man is different, but a lot of clients that aren't the typical or the identified alpha male. And this is something that I guess for men is challenging in many different ways. What is the difference between a man that's an alpha male and what are maybe the majority of men who aren't alpha males? I really don't know about that. But what is their journey in life, and how do they feel? And how does that affect their masculinity? Like, I'm not saying it largely affects their masculinity if they're not alpha males, but it in some way there's something there that matters to men. And I could probably say more about that, but that's not the point of this video. And I also just want to say that, I've done my research. I've worked with so many men over the last 30 years. And I continue to feel a lot for men and in working with men. And I open up that space. And, I'm not going to be a perfect fit or a good fit for every single person or man out there. But for so many, versus the few that maybe it's not a good fit, or things they don't go deep into the work. It doesn't, and that doesn't happen. And that's everybody's choice. Well, so many men really know they need to go deep into the work. And why is that? Well, there's a higher rate of suicide for men who go through this devastating, traumatizing abuse than women who go through it with men, or women who go through it with women. And I'm not sure about gay men who go through it with same-sex partners. But the heterosexual man is very much in peril. And of course, it's not the same for every man. But the commenter, and I'll be reading the comment in the podcast portion of this video / podcast video, and I'll be speaking more about that. But he does mention how many men after these relationships don't survive the relationship breakup with a borderline woman or a comorbid BPD, NPD woman, and maybe some know that and some don't know that. Many men commit suicide. And I'm not saying there's never been a woman that committed suicide after a borderline man or a narcissistic man, but there's a reason. There's so many reasons actually why this is much more difficult for men, because they're not raised, and I'm not saying men should be raised like girls, but boys aren't raised like girls. And of course we don't want to say that boys should be raised like girls, but boys are raised still to this day by more parents than not in a way that suggests that men are just supposed to be tough and not feel. And society and culture, kind of inculcate men with that as well. What is the expectation of being a man? And that is what so many men get hit by and hurt by and devastated by, on top of the trauma and the devastation and the shattering of being so abused by these women. I watched the Red Pill documentary. I've worked with men who were involved, maybe not in the documentary proper, but certainly as activists around the documentary, and getting that seen in many places in the country in which I live, in the province specifically, and men who have done amazing jobs defending themselves against these women in court, which is to say still a smaller percentage of men, as courts continue to not understand these issues, and where children are involved. These women with BPD and or NPD, these certain subset type of women that more severely impacted with this, that will go to no ends to punish a man after they've destroyed him, and to alienate men from their children. And there's nothing right about that. This idea that children just need their mother, well, it's a borderline, untreated, largely emotionally incapacitated, and or BPD, NPD woman. It's unbelievable, incredible devastation. And especially, it happens for men, period. And then, of course, if they have children and families, and the parental alienation, and the whole, if there's areas where women may say that men have had it so much better than women, but I don't know that there's many of those areas left in life. And aside from that, this certainly isn't one of them. I would say these women are much more than BPD, and it might not just be BPD, NPD. And maybe that these women, never mind BPD and some women being the female variant of antisocial personality disorder, it might just be that some of these women are plain, straight up psychopathic. So men are really hurting. I have clients that are MGTOW men. I have clients that are involved in other movements and men's rights movements, and I support all of them. I don't think that MGTOW men, and many men in MGTOW, are men going their own way, and specifically not from all women, but cluster B women. And I don't know how many men could really take, offense at that, and yet there are probably some out there. But I don't think there's anything weak or victim-like or about MGTOW men or red pill men who are going their own way. There has been so many atrocities that men have suffered from cluster B women, and in general, to themselves, their financial lives, their businesses, everything they built and put their heart and soul into, and a lot of hard work. And then when you add children into the mix, and what happens, there are women out there who have misrepresented a child, like they've had an affair, and they'll misrepresent a child to a man for the child's life. Maybe it's from the time of they had an affair, and they got pregnant, and they say it's the man that they're married to, and then the next thing you know, that man loves and raises that child for 5, 7, 8, 10, 15 years, and then finds out it was not his child. This is the kind of atrocities that the severely impacted, and I would say mainly co-morbid BPD, NPD, and or just straight up psychopathic women are doing, and devastating so many men, and lots of men commit suicide. And I've had a few clients, male clients, over the years who've taken their lives, and I have had, I can't be too specific, but within a certain frame of time, or just over time, I'll say, many men who have attempted suicide, thankfully, we're still here, or if it's more recent, I can't really say, but they survived a suicide attempt and came back to doing the work, and was able to help them help themselves through the process of healing so that they would find their way back to wanting to live. Because so many men, this could happen for women too, but it happens to more men, that they really are suicidal after, especially a wife with a family, but any of this treatment that is so emasculating or threatens to or makes men feel like utter failures and emasculated. And that is something that is extremely wounding for men. And I don't think it happens the same way for women. So so I'm going to do this podcast video, the rest of this in podcast video now, but I just want to say I 100% support MGTOW men, red pill men, men making their own choices, especially it's men of all ages, but in MGTOW and men that is men going their own way. And also in the red pill movement for men and probably other movements out there, they definitely are largely represented by millennials. And what's going on for millennial men and the generation down especially, it's, the heterosexual male is losing any idea what to do with the heterosexual female today. And this has been documented and talked about widely across YouTube and other genre areas. And men and women aren't getting together as much in the younger generations. And so, and of course this could apply to older men as well. And so I really respect MGTOW men and red pill men, and I understand where they're coming from, and I understand their devastation, and I would not be somebody who would ever judge that. And so I just want to say I'm out here for men that would resonate with me. If you're looking for some help and you really don't know what to do, as I have already a lot of men that are clients of mine in that situation, finding their way through, but in the beginning, just starting out from a place of utter devastation, wherein often they just don't see the way forward to live, or they don't want to continue to live, and that's not weakness. That's not about weakness in men. It's about a vulnerability in something that maybe a lot of men aren't taught in their childhood. And the culture doesn't support men being able to express their emotions. And I mean really viscerally express and show their emotions. Like just cry. Or really feel something in the moment genuinely. They have trouble finding support for that because their buddies, other men they know, their fathers, their brothers, they all say, hey, suck it up, come on, man, be a man, be a man, be a man. Well, maybe that's an alpha male's idea of what it means to be a man. But obviously what it means to be a man is a little bit secondary to what it means to be a human being. Because people feel, people hurt, people get devastated, and a lot of those people, just by the numbers of how many women have borderline personality or comorbid BPD, NPD, just by those numbers alone, which it's getting more equal between males and females diagnosed with BPD or BPD, NPD comorbid. But there's a lot of women, as I know, I mean, I'm in a relationship now, but in the lesbian community also, women, who like the same sex, it's really hard to deal with the reality of how many women there are out there with BPD, if not more. So again, I really respect men. I understand how this is an incredible journey for so many men. And I find that the more a man is in touch with his need to be in touch with his emotions, is in touch with being devastated and struggling to find the ability to cope with everything that has to be coped with, to learn their way through, to heal, and also to deal with the vulnerability that gets exposed in all of that versus what they've been inculcated to believe men aren't supposed to feel or do or show their emotions and that type of thing. And I think it's also important to stress that, culture still doesn't support men who are sensitive and caring and really show their emotions, and they're very incredibly loving, giving human beings. And it's almost like somehow compared to the alpha male, then many men believe that somehow they're weaker than. And yet the alpha male can talk a long time about maybe what they've been through or whatnot, but where's the emotion? Where's the empathy? Where's the ability to really show the vulnerability that they claim to have? And I'm not saying that against all alpha males, because all males aren't the same, whether alpha or not. And I don't pretend to know what it's like to be an alpha male or what that means to a man that's an alpha male. But I know that a lot of other men who don't consider or who describe themselves as not being alpha males, what they describe going through and experiencing from alpha males, and just a culture of, hey, man up, toughen up, come on, get over it, that type of thing. It's not healthy for men, and a lot of men need to get reacquainted with not only giving themselves permission and knowing that it's quite masculine to be able to cry and to feel what you feel. A lot of men need reparation and healing around that, because a lot of men that end up with borderline women or BPD, co-morbid NPD women, or whatever the case in cluster B, they've often been hurt by a mother, sometimes with cluster B, or just an emotionally unavailable mother. A lot of different circumstances. And so a lot of men, I think, work with me because they're seeking to go to the depth of the inner child healing, the family of origin work, self-differentiation, among other things, in this process of healing and recovery. And they know that they need to do some work with a woman because I guess as a woman, I have a way of understanding things, yes, even about men when they hurt and their vulnerability, that a lot of men don't understand. And yes, there are other male counselors out there who would understand that. But again, when you're wounded by your mother, or there is something left over that was really hurtful from your mother, and then you end up with a cluster B woman, sometimes it's very hard for these men to turn to a man, let alone an alpha male. So I'm out here if you resonate with me. I hope you find the rest of this video, which will be in podcast format, helpful. And like I said, I just want to reiterate, I respect MGTOW men. There is no weakness in that choice. Men going their own way have the choice to do that. Men that identify as being red pill men or MGTOW men are finding their own way, in their own way, and it's not a weakness, because I think alpha males out there would suggest that it is, and that they're just blaming women, or they would virtue signal something to that effect. It's just not the case. So with the rest of this podcast, I will be reading the commenter's comment and speaking to the reality of 30 years experience of working with many, many men, and why this is in many ways more devastatingly painful, damaging, wounding, traumatizing, and difficult for men to survive than even most women. And the comment that was left on my video, the pain of men and healing from a relationship with a borderline woman, the commenter says, I've had 2 separate BPD women say at the beginning of a relationship that if they see a man cry, they immediately lose respect and are disgusted, and can never see him the same way again. I allowed myself to be groomed and reprogrammed by them, appealing to my male ego. And just by the commenter's use of the word groomed, it sounds like they were narcissistic, personality disordered, or comorbid BPD, NPD. Because it's narcissists that groom, not people with BPD. The commenter continues, I already hate to cry in public and find it embarrassing, but I locked myself away and never felt safe with these women and maintained a bit of a facade of amplified masculinity and lost myself in these women. Simply, the more I acted like her all-accepting parent, the more stability was maintained in our relationship. I wasn't a doormat and even had urges for violence, which is weird for me as I'm an extremely laid-back person, and was extremely frustrated with how superficial our relationship was. All these women knew how to do is flirt and be charming. I also deluded myself into thinking she was a good mother as well, because I attributed any failings in that department to the fact that she was a single mother, and that must be very difficult, so she must really be stressed. All of the soothing, fixing, helping, listening really drained the life out of me, as I was expected to be super masculine, but also have a big heart that could withstand whatever shitty comment she would make. The only time I felt good in the relationship was in the first 3 weeks, where she was being super loving and stroked my ego about how much of a man I was. I think the reason why it hurts so much for men with these relationships, when these relationships end, is after it's indicated that the success of the relationship depends on you being, quote, the perfect man, unquote. The end of the relationship symbolizes our failure as men for us. We didn't measure up, and we don't know why, and all we have left is our emotions because we have no logical closure from our ex-BPD partner. I am not surprised many commit suicide because no one gave them the tools to navigate outward through my emotions, and it's been difficult to learn these skills as an adult, as nowhere feels safe anymore. Good luck to any guy this resonates with, and you can get better. I just want to say I've been through it too, and keep learning and growing, otherwise this will be happening to us. Peace. So well said by a man who's found his way to making it through this, with all the knocks and the ways in which this really truly does affect men, and differently than how it affects women. And the idea that a man has to be, quote, the perfect man, maybe a lot of women with BPD and or BPD, NPD, or narcissistic women, narcissistic personality disordered women, definitely have that. They will charm and persuade and be helping you to, like, be grooming you, and you will be losing yourself, not only your sense of self, but your sense of self as a man, with your masculinity and what that means. And so men often aren't left with their sense of themselves or their masculinity intact, because these women are looking, as the commenter said, for, quote, the perfect man, unquote. They are looking for the object of their father, and in many cases they're not looking for the father they never had. They are subconsciously mired in the repetition compulsion cycle of finding a man exactly like their father was. And what does that mean? Well, maybe their father was an alpha male. Maybe their father was, a very masculine, what's very masculine mean? But a very alpha male that exuded perhaps a kind of masculinity that some men, when they have BPD or they have NPD, like many of these women with BPD, have a father that's a narcissist or borderline or BPD, NPD, or in my case, I had a dark triad father. And the thing is, so they exude this false sense of alpha male in that they try to be so overreachingly, overcompensatorily, out of defense, like uber, quote, masculine, unquote, which I don't believe that's what true masculinity is. And so then when they abuse their daughters, or they're emotionally unavailable and whatever else could have happened there, it's like the daughter, the woman with BPD, or comorbidly both, or the narcissistic woman, is then really turning you from a subconscious place into that father, into that man, into that overcompensatory, not healthy, not balanced man who exuded a facade of uber masculinity to hide his vulnerability, to hide his woundedness, to hide, narcissistic men, dark triad men, etc. They're all, even borderline men, they're all more, they present differently than women. And so what this man was feeling and how he summarized his experience, and that she expected him to be super masculine, you see, that was really more connected to what her father was like, and how she saw this man, and how all of them will see, untreated or not well treated, will see the male partner in the various ways that their father was. And they're also going to fight back. So if you become a strong enough, or you become more masculine, like this commenter said he tried to do, or not, maybe more masculine isn't the right way to put it, but he said that he was expected to be super masculine. So he tried amplify. He had a facade of amplified masculinity, which really wasn't who he was, which is not to say that he wasn't a masculine man, obviously. But so it sounds like what happened to this commenter, in large part, was this, what so many borderline and or borderline narcissistic, comorbid or narcissistic women will do to a man, which is, they'll all see man as the bad object father or the good object father never had, but the thing is, when a father has been brutal to a daughter, and then a woman who goes on to have BPD or comorbid BPD, NPD, or narcissistic personality disorder, then they will be in their own repetition compulsion cycles of what they believe a man needs to be. And there is no way for a man to be what these women have a fantasy that a man should be. And it's interesting that this commenter said that the more he acted like her all-accepting parent, the more stability was in the relationship. Okay, so she wasn't seeing this man for who he was, as most of them don't see you for who you are. And the commenter said, I wasn't a doormat, even had urges for violence, which is weird for me. So putting on a facade of, as the commenter said, amplified masculinity, and however that would have played out for this man, and probably does for many men, and then what was happening to him, how he was being treated and abused and traumatized, he then felt like urges to be violent, which is unlike him. So they're very provocative in this way. And more than provocative sexually, they're provocative of trying to have you be that, in this case, for many women with BPD, NPD, comorbid, or narcissistic women, more so than even many women with BPD alone, they're wanting that man to be what the father was, and often the father was a cluster B. So the father was exuding a facade of amplified masculinity to overcompensate for his own whatever was going on. Like, was the father a borderline? Was the father BPD, NPD, comorbid? Was the father a narcissist? Was the father a dark triad? Malignant narcissist, psychopath, Machiavellianism, and I would add in sadistic personality disorder, which isn't in the DSM-5. So this would set up any man to be decimated. And again, what it means to a man to have his masculinity and his personhood devastated at the same time is something that I don't think I understand, because I've worked with so many men, but it's something that I can't know first person because I'm not a man. And it's something that makes us all much more complicated, devastating, and traumatic for so many men, because they experience it as a failure, and like the commenter alluded to, a failure of their own manhood and masculinity. And also that leaves men then feeling emasculated or weak, when in fact they've been traumatized and they have a vulnerability And it's not really a weakness, but it's about being in a devastating place of hurt and trauma. And so I really hope if you're a man out there right now, devastated, shattered, it's on, it's off again, you don't know what to do, you don't know how to feel, you can't find support, the men in your life, your buddies, a brother, a father, whomever, they're just telling you, hey, toughen up, man up, and you don't know what to do with that, and you're not finding support. If I resonate with you, I'm out here to help you, and I hope you know how heartfelt this message is to you men out there who are being devastated by cluster B women. So I just hope this was helpful, and I would just encourage every man to try to understand and find your way to understanding, but it's very difficult, that in spite of culture, and a culture now wherein, a year or two ago, that company, Razor Company, had this ad, adhering to the fifth wave or whatever wave they're in now of the ultra left feminist agenda of, like, I don't believe in any of that crap. That masculinity is somehow toxic. No, it isn't. And yet so many males, as I've said, feel like if they're not an alpha male, that somehow their masculinity is, they might not feel this in general, that their masculinity is somewhat, quote, less than, unquote, than an alpha male's, because I think that's, yes, I can't really say much more about that. I'm not a male. But the thing is that many men see the alpha male as being somehow stronger and tougher, and yet that's the facade of the alpha male. So everybody, take care.